In some cities, homes are packed so tightly that there is almost no space left, yet life continues among layers of rooftops. In some communities, daily life takes place entirely on the water, with boats becoming the only way to get around. Behind the prosperity of the cities are hidden corners where living spaces have been squeezed to the point of suffocation. Beneath makeshift homes pieced together from scraps, their only source of livelihood grows from the very things the city has thrown away. Today, we'll step into the hidden corners of the world's cities, where life is not simply about living, but about finding a way to survive in increasingly harsh conditions. While modern megacities rise with towering concrete skyscrapers, there remains a community floating entirely on dark waters, heavily polluted with trash. That suffocating urban landscape is Makoko, one of the world's largest floating informal settlements, with a population density reaching up to 300,000 people per square mile. Sitting in a 15-foot hand-built wooden boat, weaving through the narrow waterways, you will be overwhelmed by the foul smell and clouds of smoke from fish-smoking fires in temperatures reaching 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Four generations of Igun residents have been born, raised, and passed away on fragile wooden platforms, with many spending most of their lives without setting foot on solid ground. To stabilize their homes against the constant movement of the water, local residents often compress layers of plastic waste and sludge into the lagoon bed around the wooden stilts. Thousands of families live without access to the national power grid, while paying up to 5 times the normal price for each container of clean water. Our journey through this extraordinary floating city now opens the way to even more extreme destinations waiting to be explored. Imagine a place where millions of pounds of waste are not buried, but instead become the very foundation supporting an entire community. That is Manshiat Nasser, a suffocating urban landscape in Egypt, where garbage fills everything from the streets and living rooms to the rooftops. Under the intense 105 degrees Fahrenheit heat, visitors are immediately overwhelmed by the stench of rotting trash mixed with a thick layer of chemical-smelling smog. Walking through narrow alleys less than 6 feet wide, you must yield to trucks carrying towering loads of scrap stacked up to 20 feet high. At just 5 years old, many children leave school to sort plastic by identifying materials through smell or by burning them with their bare hands. Every day, residents process up to 16 million pounds of waste and achieve a remarkable 90% recycling rate before we move on to the next harsh location. A suffocating urban maze exists in the heart of bustling Mumbai, with an astonishing population density exceeding 860,000 people per square mile. The megaslum of Dharavi greets visitors with dark, narrow alleyways so tight that pedestrians often have to turn sideways to squeeze through gaps barely 2 feet wide. Walking through this stifling environment, you can clearly feel the intense heat, which can reach 125 degrees Fahrenheit, as millions of corrugated metal roofs absorb and radiate the summer sun. Within this crowded space, sanitation conditions are severely strained, with a single public toilet serving as many as 1,400 residents on average. Despite constant exposure to heavily polluted air, hundreds of thousands of people continue to earn a living through a recycling industry valued at approximately $1 billion. This stark picture of resilience amid extreme overcrowding and infrastructure challenges offers a powerful perspective before leading us to the next dangerous destination. Known as an urban hell, Monster Building hides an extremely crowded design that turns everyday life into a suffocating maze. The name Monster comes from this huge gray concrete structure, where the rough design looks as if it is swallowing thousands of residents into its massive interior. The most unique feature of the complex is its concrete sky view, where thousands of apartments are stacked together and reduce the blue sky to a narrow, rectangular strip. This enormous concrete structure blocks natural sunlight and creates a severe heat island effect from thousands of air conditioner fans. The combination of intense heat and high humidity turns the damp walls into a perfect place for mold to grow, causing serious problems for the respiratory health of residents. Even with a record population density of 3,600,000 people per square mile, thousands of people continue to live and maintain their daily routines inside this limited space. This suffocating setting has become an unforgettable backdrop that directly inspired the dark future worlds seen in blockbuster movies such as Transformers, Age of Extinction, and Ghost in the Shell. Deep in the heart of Manila, Tondo emerges as a suffocating urban nightmare, with its population density soaring to more than 191,000 people per square mile. Walking into the dark and breathtaking alleyways here, visitors will witness hundreds of families crammed together in rooms measuring a mere 100 square feet. Unlike almost any other urban area, the overwhelming sense of confinement is intensified by the legacy of a massive mountain of waste that once reached a height of 213 feet. Even though the giant dump has been flattened, methane gas from millions of tons of decaying garbage buried underground continues to leak beneath the floors of nearby homes. Strolling through these narrow pathways, travelers will be stunned to discover that countless impoverished families survive on food prepared from leftover meat scavenged from trash bins. Despite facing constant threats from pitch-black floodwaters and rapidly spreading fires, thousands of residents remain trapped in this area simply because it is the only place where they can earn a daily living. Migingo is a granite outcrop rising from the heart of Lake Victoria, offering a heart-pounding experience as visitors ride fragile wooden boats to reach what feels like a floating fortress. This tiny island possesses remarkably little land, yet endures an astonishing population density, where hundreds of people crowd together in conditions of relentless and overwhelming confinement. The island's architecture forms a dizzying maze of tightly packed metal-walled homes stacked as high as 3 stories, resembling towering and dangerously unsteady matchboxes. The island's geological foundation is almost completely overwhelmed beneath the weight of hundreds of tons of construction materials, steel frames, and weathered metal sheets assembled by human hands. If the crushing overcrowding of Migingo pushed people toward the brink of conflict, then Koh Phangan in Thailand reveals another extraordinary way of life drifting across the water. This planet's strangest land possesses a ground made entirely of rotting plants, where the floor bounces softly beneath every step taken by visitors. That place is the Uros Floating Islands, an ancient refuge community floating on the water at 12,507 feet above sea level. Squeezed into spaces smaller than 50 by 50 feet, the residents here must endure temperatures of 15 degrees Fahrenheit, penetrating directly through the thin reed floor on winter nights. Not only do they suffer from chronic arthritis caused by constant humidity, but they also rely on lake water affected by lead and mercury contamination from illegal gold mining. Even more remarkably, the decaying reed foundation beneath the islands forces residents to continually add a new layer of reeds about 1 foot thick every week to prevent the islands from sinking into the depths below. Few people would imagine that there is a place so harsh that residents distill toxic alcohol from the black sewage flowing through the valley just to survive. In Mathare, Kenya, the site of thousands of smoking alcohol stills beside polluted streams filled with human waste and garbage, is the clearest proof of severe environmental destruction. This homemade alcohol is mixed with rusty batteries and poisonous cleaning chemicals, causing hundreds of struggling workers to lose their eyesight or die every year. When night falls, this crowded slum is completely swallowed by darkness because the electrical system has collapsed, leaving only the faint light of oil lamps. Inside this suffocating environment, the fear of criminal gangs and the practice of throwing bags of human waste onto the streets at night have turned the area into a frightening place without law and order. Even while trapped in these conditions, thousands of local young people continue collecting garbage in exchange for the chance to play soccer and change their future, creating a powerful picture of a harsh but unforgettable city. When viewed from above, an entire mountainside sloping at 45 degrees appears to be completely engulfed by a vast sea of red brick homes clinging precariously to the hillside. That extraordinary landscape is Patare, where more than 500,000 people live, packed together in hundreds of thousands of unreinforced brick houses. Stepping into this labyrinth, you will immediately feel the harsh conditions as you climb hundreds of steep stairways beneath scorching temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit. A report from Columbia University estimates that the area generates approximately 1,100 to 1,380 tons of trash every day, with large piles of waste accumulating throughout the neighborhood. Your feet will tremble with every sudden acceleration of the moto taxis, the only vehicles capable of navigating alleyways measuring just 3 feet wide. Suffocating overcrowding, accumulated waste, and treacherous terrain have combined to transform this place into one of the most extreme urban environments in South America. Hidden in the heart of Ghana's capital, Old Fadama has become a unique urban landscape where vast amounts of electronic waste shape the surrounding environment. Covering a mere 77.3 acres, the area is home to more than 80,000 people, alongside millions of tons of discarded computers and electronic devices. Stepping into this maze, visitors are immediately overwhelmed by narrow walkways less than 3 feet wide, where black smoke from burning cables billows throughout the year. The scorching air often reaches between 113 and 122 degrees Fahrenheit, turning every journey through the area into a harsh survival experience in the heart of the city. Chicken eggs produced here have been found to contain dioxin levels more than 220 times higher than the recommended safety limit, revealing the severe contamination that has spread throughout the food chain. The combination of suffocating population density and extremely high levels of lead pollution has transformed this place into a dark and haunting destination. Leaving this suffocating environment behind, the journey continues to another urban hell that is no less brutal. Could a thriving community truly exist while floating entirely upon the sea without possessing even a single inch of natural land beneath its foundations? The answer is Koh Phangan, a floating village founded during the late 18th century by Indonesian fishermen after laws prevented them from owning land on the mainland. Every part of the settlement is tightly anchored against the base of towering limestone cliffs that rise dramatically from the floor of the deep surrounding sea. The weight of hundreds of homes rests upon tens of thousands of wooden pillars, enduring immense pressure equal to the combined weight of more than 2,000 elephants. Sudden rises in sea level submerge the supporting pillars, creating flood depths reaching approximately the height of a fully loaded 15-ton cargo truck. The worldwide fame of the floating soccer team has attracted millions of visitors, roughly 2,500 times greater than the village's entire resident population. This floating village has proudly endured for more than 2 centuries, standing as a living legend across the southern coastal bay of this remarkable nation. Emerging across endless waters is Kampong Luang, one of the world's most extraordinary floating villages, where every aspect of daily life unfolds upon gently rocking wooden rafts. The entire community depends completely on declining fish resources, constantly relocating homes to keep pace with the relentless and unpredictable fluctuations of the surrounding waters. Continuous deposits of dense sediment have transformed the waterways into murky channels where household waste steadily accumulates, creating thick layers of stagnant and foul-smelling mud. Families without even a single inch of land to claim survive by fastening together worn plastic barrels, creating fragile floating shelters that serve as their only homes. Every traveler stepping onto the small wooden boats immediately faces violent rocking, feeling as though standing upon the deck of a ship, battling a fierce and unforgiving storm. Which distant steel-producing city will be the next to reveal the devastating ecological disasters hidden beneath decades of relentless industrial expansion and environmental destruction? Chittagam is home to the world's largest shipbreaking yard, where the coastline is covered with enormous abandoned vessels that are dismantled entirely by hand. The waters of the great river flowing through the city are heavily contaminated with oil and industrial chemicals, containing toxic pollutants capable of altering the biological balance of a volume of water comparable to thousands of Olympic-sized swimming pools. Over many decades, the total amount of recycled steel and hazardous waste processed here has reached a weight comparable to thousands of massive ferry bridges, enough to completely fill the area of thousands of large football stadiums. Travelers visiting this city should wear protective masks at all times, even while walking near major roads, to avoid breathing the countless fine soot particles that constantly linger throughout the air. Local residents are forced to keep their windows tightly closed and spend as little time outdoors as possible to cope with the air saturated by toxic smoke and dust drifting from the sprawling scrapyards. Compressed tightly into 160 acres in Bangladesh, Korail Slum creates a world of stark contrasts by sitting directly beside some of the city's most luxurious buildings. Step across a narrow body of water just a few hundred feet wide, and you immediately enter an urban boiler with a population density exceeding 226,000 people per square mile. Imagine squeezing through dark alleyways only 2 feet wide, where sunlight almost completely disappears, and the air is filled with suffocating heat. In summer, tin roofs scorched by the sun can reach a terrifying temperature of up to 167 degrees Fahrenheit, draining the strength of everyone living beneath them. As you push deeper inside, the overpowering stench from dozens of tons of waste accumulated beneath your feet will overwhelm almost anyone. More than 70% of the residents here are climate refugees who lost their land and were left with no choice but to build unstable bamboo stilt houses over trash-filled lake waters. Inside a cramped space, offering just 78 square feet per person, tens of thousands of people remain trapped, struggling to survive amid extreme poverty. If you think a poor and difficult place like Ajagunle holds nothing but despair, this community gave birth to a famous music style inspired by the way people struggled to walk across mountains of garbage. Located beside a busy seaport, this wetland, covering 2.9 square miles, was illegally filled with millions of tons of garbage and industrial waste over many decades. Hundreds of thousands of people have no choice but to live in crowded wooden houses built on dirty mud, covered with black oil and dangerous chemicals. Even while facing constant noise pollution and the threat of disease throughout the year, the strong determination to survive has turned this community into a place that has produced many international soccer stars. From this muddy ground filled with sharp pieces of broken glass, Odion Igalo rose with determination and eventually achieved his dream of playing for Manchester United. In the heart of glamorous Cape Town, Khayelitsha emerges as an endless sea of tin shacks where more than 400,000 black residents survive under extremely poor and overcrowded urban conditions. Population density reaches suffocating levels across an area of just about 15 square miles, making this settlement one of the most violence-affected areas in South Africa. With every step along dusty roads strewn with trash and foul-smelling sewage, visitors quickly feel the sweltering heat and an intensely oppressive atmosphere. When summer temperatures exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, tens of thousands of heat-absorbing tin roofs transform temporary shacks into giant ovens, making daily life exceedingly harsh for residents. Even more dangerously, The constant threat of fire looms over the community, as the tightly packed shacks can allow an entire neighborhood to burn down within just a few minutes. Imagine the tension of navigating through narrow alleyways, where dozens of families must line up to share a single unsafe public toilet. The stark contrast between this impoverished community and the luxury resorts located just 19 miles away further highlights the cycle of hardship that traps thousands of people here. Bungin Island rises from the vast ocean, bearing the title of the world's most densely populated island, where every inch of living space has already been completely exhausted. Visiting this remarkable island creates a suffocating experience, as travelers step ashore and are immediately surrounded by constant noise, with virtually no open space anywhere in sight. The residential population density here rivals that of the most overcrowded informal settlements found within some of the world's largest metropolitan areas. The island's natural foundation has been artificially expanded by placing thousands of tons of dead coral and marine rocks to create stable ground for building homes. The urban landscape consists of tightly packed wooden houses connected directly to one another, with no setbacks or boundary fences separating neighboring families from each other. This island stands as a remarkable testament to humanity's extraordinary ability to adapt after every remaining piece of available land has been fully occupied. Ganvi is home to the largest floating village in Africa, where thousands of wooden houses stand closely together upon calm waters, forming an extraordinary man-made labyrinth. A vast network of timber piles, driven deep into the lakebed, provides sturdy foundations, allowing thousands of homes to withstand the passage of many centuries. The surrounding lake contains dense concentrations of sediment and organic matter, filling the entire living environment of the local community with nutrient-rich waters. Every wooden structure and layer of natural building material used to create the village has remained firmly anchored across the endless waters through countless generations. Travelers visiting this remarkable destination must spend hours drifting across the water by boat, relying entirely upon hand-paddled vessels to move from place to place. Local residents depend upon small wooden boats to transport both people and goods continuously through the intricate network of canals that connects every part of their floating community. Santa Cruz del Islote has become one of the world's most crowded artificial islands, where hundreds of people live together within an extraordinarily limited amount of available land. Every inch of the island's natural surface has been fully utilized, with residents expanding living space by making use of virtually every available square inch. Rapid population growth within such a tiny area has created an exceptionally dense residential environment, producing an atmosphere that often feels crowded and overwhelmingly confined. Travelers visiting this island must carefully squeeze through narrow alleyways where two people walking in opposite directions need to press closely together just to pass one another. The entire island is completely covered by tightly packed homes, intricate networks of narrow pathways, and overlapping concrete walls that leave almost no open space remaining. Additional stories have been continuously added above existing buildings, rising ever higher while extending into even the smallest remaining spaces surrounding the shared walkways. Amid the vast ocean, Hashima Island rises like a deserted concrete battleship that once held one of the highest urban population densities ever recorded. In 1959, this 16-acre island reached an astonishing population density of 216,264 people per square mile, about 12 times higher than that of New York City. As you walk through its dark corridors, you immediately feel the oppressive atmosphere of a landscape almost entirely enclosed in concrete. The island's dense concrete environment created a pronounced urban heat island effect, with temperatures reaching up to 9 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the surrounding sea. With virtually no trees or open green spaces, families of 5 often lived in apartments, measuring only 100 square feet, while some residents grew vegetables on rooftops. Surrounded by seawalls rising 30 feet above the water, daily life was accompanied by the constant roar of ventilation systems and crashing ocean waves. As you venture deeper into this haunting fortress, you are reminded that it was also the site where many forced laborers endured brutal conditions during the island's industrial past. Looking from afar like a giant concrete cliff clinging to the mountainside, this place confines tens of thousands of people within an extremely tight space. That is Rocinha, in Brazil, an urban hell with a record population density reaching 260,000 people per square mile. Following dark alleyways less than 3 feet wide, visitors must constantly duck to avoid thousands of tangled bundles of wires hanging overhead. The combination of jutting building floors and deep alleyways completely blocks sunlight, causing the air below to be constantly filled with the heavy smell of mold. This dark and poorly ventilated environment is the very factor that has turned the entire area into a tuberculosis hotspot, with an infection rate 10 times higher than normal. Try sitting behind a motorcycle, holding tightly onto a local driver as you speed through hundreds of steep stairways to experience the ultimate thrill. Located right next to million-dollar resorts, this suffocating picture of survival continues to unfold amid daily waste and the constant roar of urban life. Located beside the bustling center of Nairobi, Kibera has grown into an extraordinary urban settlement, where more than 250,000 people live within an area of less than 1 square mile. This extreme population density forces many residents to live in tin-roofed homes measuring around 100 square feet, where summer temperatures frequently exceed 95 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the greatest challenges is the limited sanitation infrastructure, with an average of 500 people sharing a single public toilet. In response to these conditions, the practice known as flying toilets emerged, in which human waste is placed in plastic bags because proper sanitation facilities are unavailable. Walking through the neighborhood, visitors immediately notice countless plastic water pipes running alongside open drainage channels. Another striking sight is the railway that passes directly through busy market areas, where trains travel only a short distance from vendors and pedestrians. Despite its challenging living conditions, Kibera continues to attract thousands of visitors each year who hope to better understand the community's resilience and daily life. Have you ever wondered why hundreds of thousands of people still choose to remain in Ciudad Bolívar, a self-built community spread across rocky mountains at an elevation of 9,000 feet? This area was once considered one of the most dangerous places because criminal gangs controlled the steep streets and enforced an unofficial curfew after 8 o'clock at night. The danger became even greater as the population density reached 87,000 people per square mile, forcing hundreds of thousands of residents to live in extremely crowded conditions. In addition to these challenges, local people have fought the constant threat of landslides on the steep rocky slopes by making their own bricks and building homes firmly attached to the mountainside. To solve the transportation crisis on slopes as steep as 45 degrees, the government introduced an urban cable car system that reduced travel time from 90 minutes to just 11 minutes. As a result, local young people covered worn brick walls with hundreds of colorful murals, transforming overwhelming poverty into an inspiring space filled with hope. Their determination to survive and their strong sense of community have kept them there, allowing them to turn what once seemed like an abandoned urban hell into the only home they have ever known. Perched at 14,232 feet in the Andes, Cerro de Pasco is one of the world's most unusual urban landscapes, gradually being consumed by a massive open-pit mine. Stepping into the city, visitors often experience dizziness from the high altitude, before seeing rows of houses standing precariously along the edge of the enormous excavation. Over the course of decades, this open-pit mine, now more than 1,000 feet deep, has expanded continuously, consuming much of the historic town center and forcing countless families to relocate. Industrial dust containing lead and arsenic has contributed to widespread heavy metal exposure, with studies reporting elevated levels in the blood of many local children. Even more troubling, contamination of the local water supply has required schools to adopt additional safety measures to reduce children's exposure to harmful substances. The harsh mountain climate, with nighttime temperatures frequently falling below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, makes daily life even more difficult for many residents. Despite the ongoing risks of landslides, pollution, and poverty, thousands of people continue to live in Cerro de Pasco because economic circumstances leave them with few alternatives. Before you is Mukuru, one of the world's most unusual urban hells, erased from official maps and transformed into a tightly packed community built on the site of a former quarry. The sight of 180,000 people living within every square mile becomes even more severe as the blazing sun heats the metal roofs, pushing indoor temperatures above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Trapped between toxic industrial factories, the residents have their most basic daily needs completely controlled by criminal gangs that secretly rule the community. Dangerous, illegal electrical wires stretch across the muddy ground like giant spider webs, ready to take the life of any child who accidentally touches them. Despite these harsh conditions, the Special Planning Area project has empowered residents to measure their own community and redesign its infrastructure, turning Mukuru into an unprecedented model of urban renewal. Isolated in the Arctic, Norilsk is an urban industrial center that releases up to 2 million tons of sulfur dioxide each year. These emissions have severely affected the surrounding environment, damaging nearly 2,000 square miles of nearby tundra. Visitors may even witness snow-stained dark gray by industrial dust, creating an unusually stark winter landscape. During winters, when temperatures can fall to -76 degrees Fahrenheit, residents face both extreme cold and long-term challenges, from industrial air pollution, which has been associated with reduced life expectancy. To cope with the permanently frozen ground, many apartment buildings are supported by concrete piles, extending approximately 100 feet into the permafrost to maintain structural stability. Leaving this harsh Arctic industrial landscape behind, our journey continues to another place that reveals a different face of life under extreme conditions. Nestled in the heart of Tonle Sap, Kampong Klang becomes a haunting city on stilts, transforming into a vast forest of wooden supports, rising as high as 33 feet during the dry season. This seemingly surreal landscape is also home to a community where more than 10,000 people face significant daily challenges while enduring temperatures that can reach 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Water quality remains a serious concern, with some areas experiencing severe bacterial contamination, including fecal indicator bacteria at extremely high concentrations. Despite living beside Southeast Asia's largest freshwater lake, many families remain trapped in poverty, with some spending up to 20% of their daily income on 5-gallon containers of purified drinking water. Traveling deeper into the village by boat, visitors encounter floating plastic waste and the constant roar of thousands of long-tail boat engines, with noise levels reaching as high as 105 decibels. This challenging environment, marked by pollution and economic hardship, continues to shape the lives of generations of local residents. Located between two powerful bodies of water, the West Point Peninsula is a suffocating urban hell that is forced to shrink again and again as ocean waves continue to attack its shoreline. The severe erosion caused by the Atlantic Ocean has washed away more than 330 feet of coastline, forcing tens of thousands of residents into the tragedy of permanent displacement without ever leaving the area. Instead of abandoning the land that is slowly disappearing beneath the sea, residents remove their rusty metal sheets, step back a few feet, and rebuild the same homes that the ocean has just swallowed. The extreme overcrowding has created a serious health crisis because toxic smoke from dirty wood-fired fish smoking stoves fills enclosed spaces with almost no ventilation. Because the community is completely isolated, any natural disaster or disease outbreak could quickly turn this narrow strip of sand into an isolated emergency camp. In the heart of Dhaka, one of the world's most crowded capitals with more than 23 million people, there is a remarkable struggle for survival where people cling to the roofs of trains just to travel. The overcrowded railway system is completely overwhelmed, forcing tens of thousands of passengers to risk their lives by climbing onto the tops of train cars under temperatures reaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Overloaded transportation is only part of the tragedy, because this city has also become an unwilling destination for millions of people displaced by climate change. Every day, about 1,500 people who have lost their homes to rising sea levels arrive from coastal areas and build temporary shelters throughout the city's slums. They leave behind their disaster-damaged hometowns only to find themselves in a suffocating environment where the main river is poisoned by millions of gallons of industrial waste. Even while breathing heavily polluted air and facing the constant threat of disease, poor workers continue to stay here in the hope of finding a chance to survive. Bantar Gebang has the largest open landfill in Southeast Asia and one of the largest in the world, turning this area into a surreal landscape of endless waste. The landscape is dominated by enormous piles of garbage built up over many decades, rising more than 160 feet and forming massive artificial mountains. The most unusual feature of this ecological hell is its social hierarchy, based on height, where a person's position is determined by where they stand on the garbage mountain. While strong young workers compete for newly delivered waste at the dangerous peaks, elderly people and children are left to collect recyclable materials at the base of the mountains. A dangerous cycle of survival has even developed as livestock feed on garbage contaminated with chemicals before being sold as food to poor residents. fine dust and countless toxic gases have built up over many years, causing more than 90% of the people living here to suffer from serious, chronic respiratory diseases and trapping them in an endless cycle of extreme poverty. Leaving behind the floating waters of Kampong Luang, viewers are drawn into another haunting destination at Temirtau, a great steel city where tens of thousands of young people once eagerly gathered to build enormous factories. Environmental monitoring has recorded toxic emissions released from the massive steel complex at levels many times higher than the permitted limits throughout this industrial region. The natural ecosystem has suffered severe destruction, with groundwater and surrounding soil becoming deeply saturated by hazardous industrial chemicals after many decades of continuous manufacturing activity. Life in this city revolves around the demanding routine of tens of thousands of steelworkers who sacrifice their labor in hazardous conditions simply to earn enough for daily survival. Visitors are often shocked to discover that cars and even residents' clothing are regularly coated with layers of black coal dust covering nearly every visible surface. Would you have enough courage to step into this polluted land and witness firsthand the devastating consequences left behind by heavy industry and decades of environmental neglect? Kasua delivers a suffocating experience as visitors weave through crowded leather markets where the air is thick with the overwhelming smell of industrial chemicals and raw animal hides. Environmental monitoring has revealed that organic waste and heavy metals discharged directly from leather workshops into nearby rivers exceed permitted limits by many times over. Daily life is completely overwhelmed by crumbling factory buildings, the relentless roar of heavy machinery, and towering piles of industrial waste that emit an overpowering and persistent stench. The local community is dominated by traditional leather tanning industries, where thousands of impoverished workers endure exhausting labor under dangerous and highly toxic working conditions every single day. Would you have enough courage to step into this place and confront its poisonous atmosphere along with the harsh realities that define everyday life there? Krakow embodies the haunting image of a ghost town, where thousands of roofless stone buildings rise beneath gray skies, forming the skeletal remains of an abandoned urban landscape. Every resident was forced to leave after a devastating landslide, leaving behind an ancient architectural complex that has remained completely uninhabited ever since. Travelers exploring this deserted town must watch every step carefully among crumbling windows and ruined structures, where weakened ceilings could collapse without warning at any moment. The entire settlement was built from stone upon a steep cone-shaped hill, standing in complete isolation above a lonely valley carved from deeply eroded clay. The stone-paved streets remain perfectly silent, creating an eerie scene where neither footsteps nor cheerful conversations disturb the overwhelming stillness surrounding the abandoned town. Every medieval stone structure continues to endure relentless natural erosion through many decades, preserving an atmosphere of breathtaking silence that has become the town's defining legacy. Jardim Gramacho was once known as the world's largest open-air landfill, where thousands of waste pickers struggled to survive among towering mountains of discarded refuse. Visiting this place was an overwhelming experience, as travelers immediately encountered the overpowering odor of decomposing garbage, creating an intense feeling of nausea from the very first moment. Environmental records show that this landfill once received millions of tons of household waste every year, comparable in weight to dozens of towering skyscrapers combined together. Geographically, the landfill sits beside a fragile coastal bay, allowing contaminated groundwater and surrounding aquatic ecosystems to become vast reservoirs of accumulated industrial and domestic waste. The surrounding settlements consisted of makeshift shelters built from plywood and torn tarps, standing closely together beneath the unstable slopes of enormous mountains of garbage. This place remains a global symbol of social inequality and ecological disaster, revealing a hidden world where unimaginable hardship became the only means of survival for thousands of people. Located at an altitude of 12,287 feet in the Andes, La Oroya is one of the most polluted and hazardous metallurgical cities on Earth. Stepping into the city, visitors are often struck by the surrounding limestone mountains, many of which have been left barren after decades of acid rain. Toxic emissions containing sulfur dioxide and heavy metal particles have long blanketed this narrow valley, contributing to extremely high rates of lead exposure among local children. Studies have reported blood lead levels reaching as high as 33.6 micrograms per deciliter in some residents, far exceeding internationally recognized health guidelines. As you travel through the town, you may notice the sharp smell of sulfur and see snow discolored by industrial pollution. Despite airborne arsenic concentrations having been measured at many times above recommended limits, thousands of families continue to depend on the smelter because it provides approximately 80% of local employment. This somber industrial landscape stands as a powerful reminder of the human cost that can accompany rapid industrial development. There are places on Earth where even the ground beneath your feet becomes a deadly trap, silently draining the health of generations of residents. The town of Kabwe in Zambia is one such urban hell, where toxic lead has contaminated nearly every inch of the soil for almost a century. Blood lead levels in children have been measured at more than 150 micrograms per deciliter, approximately 40 times higher than the reference level established by United States health authorities. Under the scorching heat of 95 degrees Fahrenheit, visitors may notice fine lead-contaminated dust in the air, along with a distinct metallic smell. When strong winds sweep across the area, towering piles of mining waste spread toxic dust over nearby water sources and the densely packed tin-roofed homes of local residents. Leaving this polluted landscape behind, our journey continues toward another extraordinary destination, filled with new surprises. Hidden in Pakistan, the Orangi town slum, spanning about 22 square miles, confines up to 2.4 million people within a suffocatingly cramped space. Amid this sea of grey concrete, the groundwater is severely contaminated by waste, making the cost of purchasing water from tankers up to 20 times higher than normal. As you walk through the narrow alleyways, you will immediately feel the intense heat radiating from tin roofs, with surface temperatures exceeding 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Medical reports indicate that waterborne diseases remain a major cause of child mortality, while tuberculosis spreads rapidly under overcrowded conditions and prolonged exposure to fine particulate pollution. Toxic smoke from illegally burned trash heaps rises every afternoon, keeping air pollution at consistently hazardous levels. Despite living in conditions that resemble an urban hell, many residents continue to stay because the rent is extremely affordable, at only about $15 per month. Now, let us continue our journey to another terrifying location on the world map. Right in the heart of America, Skid Row exists as a 50-block district with one of the highest concentrations of people experiencing homelessness in the developed world. If you step into this area, you will be shocked by the sight of thousands of worn tents lining entire sidewalks, where more than 75% of residents live without permanent housing. The most striking reality is that this sprawling encampment stands just a few dozen feet across the street from luxury high-rise apartments, renting for around $3,000 a month. Visitors passing through can clearly sense the harsh conditions of an urban encampment, where the city has at times provided only one public toilet for every 400 people. Due to severe sanitation challenges, the area has experienced outbreaks of diseases such as typhus and drug-resistant tuberculosis, despite being located in the center of a major city. The urban heat island effect turns this largely treeless concrete landscape into a giant oven when summer temperatures climb above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. These persistent hardships have contributed to a dramatically reduced average life expectancy for many Skid Row residents, estimated at around 48 years, approximately 30 years lower than the national average. Dzerzhinsk presents a unique urban nightmare, where more than 200,000 residents continue to live beside one of the most heavily contaminated chemical waste sites on the planet. Unlike an abandoned ghost town, this industrial city accumulated more than 660 million pounds of hazardous waste over nearly a century. As you walk through the streets with a tour group, you may be surprised to notice that the air sometimes carries a strangely sweet scent. Although it may seem pleasant, that sweet odor has historically been associated with highly toxic industrial chemicals, including phosgene, which can severely damage the lungs when inhaled. The long-term accumulation of toxic pollutants in the environment once contributed to a tragic decline in public health, with the average life expectancy for men reportedly falling to just 42 years. Even during the freezing winter, this industrial landscape can appear surreal, as pollution has at times discolored freshly fallen snow with unusual pale yellow or greenish hues. Located on the edge of the picturesque Caribbean coast, Cité Soleil stands as an urban nightmare, with nearly 300,000 people living within a bowl-shaped area covering about 8 square miles. Situated only 3 to 10 feet above sea level, the neighborhood has very limited natural drainage, making it highly vulnerable to flooding. As you walk with a tour group through narrow alleyways barely 3 feet wide, you will immediately feel the oppressive heat, which can exceed 105 degrees Fahrenheit, as rusty corrugated metal roofs absorb the tropical sun. The low-lying terrain causes the area to collect hundreds of tons of garbage, along with large amounts of contaminated mud washed down from higher ground after heavy rains. Persistent flooding often forces residents to wade through water mixed with untreated sewage that can reach depths of up to 3 feet outside their homes. Crossing from one neighborhood to another, visitors quickly become aware of the insecurity that has long affected the area, where the sound of gunfire has too often become part of daily life. Chronic infrastructure shortages, widespread poverty, and economic hardship combine to make this one of the most challenging urban environments in the world. Imagine stepping into an industrial city where the natural groundwater contains concentrations of the highly toxic chemical chromium-6 that are 124 times higher than the recommended safety limit. A tour through Kanpur may leave you with a burning throat and a metallic taste after just 24 hours. Frequently ranked among the world's most polluted cities, its thick atmosphere exposes residents to air pollution that has been compared to smoking around 20 cigarettes a day. The Ganges River, flowing through the city, receives approximately 119 million gallons of wastewater every day, placing enormous pressure on its ecosystem. Urban green space remains extremely limited, with parks and tree cover accounting for less than 2% of the city's total area of 156 square miles. Despite facing significantly elevated health risks, including higher rates of cancer, hundreds of thousands of low-income workers continue to live here while earning as little as $3 a day. This harsh environment stands as a vivid testament to the difficult balance between industrial development, environmental pollution, and human survival. The boundary between extreme luxury and absolute poverty is sometimes separated by a road just 6 lanes wide. Located beside glittering skyscrapers, Guryong village exists as a bitter urban scar, marked by an astonishing visual contrast. Walking through narrow alleyways, measuring only about 3 feet wide, you will immediately feel suffocated by a dense network of power lines hanging overhead, like a spiderweb. Extreme overcrowding forces between 1,200 and 2,000 informal housing structures into cramped spaces beginning at just 170 square feet. Because much of the infrastructure is built from flammable materials, the area has recorded at least 16 major fires since 2009. Harsh winters, with temperatures dropping below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, freeze the water pipes, forcing residents to carry every gallon of water through toxic smoke from honeycomb coal briquettes. Sweltering summers turn corrugated tin roofs into ovens exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while heavy rains can easily submerge the area beneath several feet of filthy water. As visitors venture deeper into this dilapidated maze, they are shocked to realize that it serves as the final refuge for hundreds of impoverished elderly people left behind. Picture is one of the most toxic towns in the world because the entire community is surrounded by enormous piles of lead mining waste and faces the constant danger of widespread ground collapse. The most devastating legacy of this place is its 83 waste rock piles, filled with toxic heavy metals, containing about 48 million cubic yards of waste and rising as high as 200 feet. Instead of avoiding this dangerous environment, local children spent many decades using these gray lead waste piles as playgrounds for sand sliding and bicycle riding. As a result, a medical study in 1994 found that 38% of the children had blood lead levels above the dangerous limit, causing permanent brain damage. Besides breathing polluted air, the town also sits above hundreds of miles of empty underground mines, making buildings vulnerable to collapsing into the ground at any time. Even though the government spent tens of millions of dollars buying homes to relocate residents, some people refused to leave and remained in the dying town until their final days. Today, the haunting landscape of abandoned and decaying structures has turned this place into a popular destination for explorers, bringing to mind the world after a nuclear disaster. Our next journey takes us to Villa 31, one of the most unusual places where a massive highway passes directly through the community and hangs above the heads of local residents. The elevated concrete highway cuts through the neighborhood only a few feet above the rooftops, so the constant roar of traffic, traveling at 50 miles per hour, echoes day and night above the residents' beds. Even more surprising, this neighborhood sits right beside one of the wealthiest areas in Buenos Aires, creating an extremely sharp contrast in the heart of the city. This huge gap between wealth and poverty allowed drug gangs to gain control and turned many narrow streets into areas that police could not safely enter. To completely solve the problems of this urban hell, the government launched a redevelopment project worth more than 320 million United States dollars to relocate families living beneath the highway and rebuild the local infrastructure. As a result, the architecture became remarkably unique as a modern Ministry of Education building with mirrored glass now stands proudly among rows of crowded brick houses. This incredible transformation has turned the once dark and troubled neighborhood into a popular tourist destination, opening a completely new chapter before our journey continues to the next remarkable place. Located in the heart of busy Bangkok, Klong Toei exists as a harsh urban contradiction where great wealth and extreme poverty are separated by nothing more than a single concrete wall. At the center of this community is a huge wholesale market that operates 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, supplying food to some of the city's finest restaurants while remaining filled with the smell of fish, blood, and garbage. The most frightening reality is the overwhelming population density of more than 80,000 people per square mile, forcing tens of thousands of residents to crowd into fragile homes built on wooden stilts above dark, polluted water. Because they do not legally own the land, residents must buy clean water from private suppliers at prices 3 to 5 times higher than those paid in the wealthy neighborhood next door. With only about 150 square feet of living space for an entire large family, the constant threat of disease outbreaks and fires remains a part of everyday life. Today, a multi-billion United States dollar port modernization project threatens to erase this entire community and force tens of thousands of residents from their homes. Alang serves as the world's largest maritime graveyard, where hundreds of enormous ships lie rusting across a barren shoreline after reaching the end of their working lives. The total weight of metal and dismantled vessels processed here has exceeded more than 70 million tons, comparable to the combined weight of hundreds of thousands of skyscrapers. Visitors must carefully weave through gigantic, torn-open ship hulls, where countless sharp metal fragments lie, waiting beneath every step, and pose a constant danger of injury. Anyone witnessing the scene cannot help but shudder, as thousands of workers climb directly across the skeletons of massive ships, breaking apart steel without proper protective equipment. The surrounding environment is engulfed by heavy chemical odors and toxic welding fumes released from countless abandoned ships being dismantled manually every single day. The sound of crashing waves is completely overwhelmed by the deafening clash of metal and the relentless pounding of massive sledgehammers against steel plates, measuring many inches thick. Hidden behind what seems to be a peaceful appearance, the Payatas landfill is a unique urban hell where extreme poverty created an entire food economy based on discarded waste. Residents collect rotten leftover meat from garbage trucks, wash it in dirty water, and then fry it again to make a dish called pag, filled with harmful bacteria, selling it for less than 50 cents. This unsafe food has become the only source of energy that allows tens of thousands of people to survive each day in crowded and uncomfortable metal shacks. Although the government has now covered the outside with green grass, beneath the surface remains a massive mountain of garbage that continues releasing toxic methane gas for many decades. In addition, many children born here face the daily risk of becoming infected with human immunodeficiency virus, or hepatitis B, because they regularly step on discarded medical needles. Can you believe that there is a place where crossing a single road instantly takes you into a real urban hell known as Alexandra Township? In sharp contrast to the wealthy neighborhoods nearby, this area is packed with a suffocating population density of more than 150,000 people per square mile. Within this crowded space, thousands of metal shacks, measuring less than 100 square feet, not only lack clean water, but also endure frequent power outages lasting for many hours. Despite the harsh living conditions and constant danger, lively music from the metal homes continues to fill the air as a symbol of the residents' strong spirit and determination. This striking contrast and powerful way of life have turned Alexandra Township into one of the most unusual places that you are unlikely to find anywhere else in the world. Once the leading golden vacation paradise of the Mediterranean, Varosha suddenly became a frozen urban hell in only 4 hours. The outbreak of military conflict in 1974 forced all of the residents to flee, turning this once luxurious city into an abandoned area sealed off for half a century. As people escaped to save their lives, thousands of cars from 1974 that were still almost new were left behind in underground parking garages. The combination of temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit and salty sea air has triggered concrete cancer, causing high-rise buildings to crack apart and collapse from within. Despite the danger from toxic asbestos and hidden landmines, many looters have continued risking their lives by entering the area in search of valuable artifacts worth millions of United States dollars. Walking past the barbed wire barriers that sealed this place for half a century creates an unforgettable feeling because of the surreal contrast between peaceful nature and the terrifying ruins. Trapped between barren rocky mountains, the city of Peshawar appears like a suffocating concrete fortress, where war and rapid population growth have created an extremely harsh place to live. The overwhelming population density, together with solid brick houses built with walls as thick as 18 inches and no ground floor windows, has turned the entire city into a one-of-a-kind, passive defensive system. The maze of narrow streets has unintentionally become a natural pressure-reducing system that weakens the shock waves from explosions and helps protect people inside their homes. More than 1.5 million people displaced by war crossed the border and remained trapped here for generations, pushing public services and urban infrastructure to the point of collapse. Despite an environment heavily damaged by garbage and pollution, the ancient Pashtunwali tribal code continues to serve in place of government authority to maintain social order. Unconditional hospitality and strong community support remain the only force that allows millions of people to continue surviving in the heart of this urban hell. You are watching a journey to Ciudad Nezahualcóyotl, a city with a perfect grid layout, seen from above, but slowly destroyed from below by harmful alkaline salt. Salt rising from the bottom of the ancient lake soaks into the walls with tremendous force, causing steel to rust and brick mortar to crumble after only a few years of use. This strange white staining forces poor residents to keep repairing their walls and raising their foundations, trapping them in an endless financial struggle just to keep their homes standing. harsh living conditions are also reflected in its overwhelming population density of 44,000 people per square mile, leaving almost no personal space for residents. Get ready to discover another urban nightmare where polluted air and enormous piles of garbage continue to threaten life every single day. Nema is known as one of the harshest urban hells in West Africa, where tens of thousands of crowded homes are trapped in the middle of a busy capital city. The entire living environment is scorched by countless rusty metal roofs, turning the whole neighborhood into a giant oven that reaches 115 degrees Fahrenheit on sunny days. Despite these suffocating living conditions, more than 15 ethnic groups continue to survive together by sharing a common language, sharing every bucket of water, and managing their own community. The energetic rhythm of homemade street music rises from the middle of this devastated landscape, proving that art can still flourish, even in the most desperate conditions. You will be surprised to learn that the massive Dandora landfill, covering 74 acres, has turned this area into one of the world's most brutal urban hells. This place has become a lawless area, completely controlled by armed criminal gangs that force people to pay collection fees and demand extremely high prices for recyclable waste. In this harsh environment, thousands of marabou storks with wingspans reaching 9 feet constantly circle overhead, fighting with livestock and children for toxic scraps of food. The greatest tragedy is that nearly 50% of local children have blood lead levels above the safe limit, suffering permanent brain damage from the very beginning of their lives. The long-term buildup of toxic chemicals has turned every breath the residents take into a cruel threat to their health, trapping them in a cycle of poverty that is almost impossible to escape. Is there anywhere else in the world with living conditions more brutal and suffocating than this place? Stay with us as we continue exploring the next incredible location. with three strange numbers: 52 square feet, 50 yen, and 20 riots. Kamagasaki is an urban hell that has been completely erased from the official map of Japan. In sharp contrast to the glamorous image of Osaka, this area packs tens of thousands of struggling people into tiny rented rooms no larger than a matchbox. Along the smoke-filled alleyways, residents survive with the help of vending machines that sell food and drinks at extremely low prices, providing the cheapest source of calories to fight hunger. To escape debt and the Yakuza, thousands of workers chose to buy the identities of dead people on the black market and live like ghosts. The combination of legal uncertainty and harsh living conditions has turned this cramped neighborhood into a lonely hidden corner where people quietly disappear in the middle of the city. Blanketing Karabash is the grim reputation of being one of the most polluted places on Earth, where the air reeks of sulfur with a burning smell that stings every throat. Toxic emissions, released from the local smelter, once reached levels equivalent to every resident carrying poisonous pollution weighing 15 times more than their own body weight. More than 1,500,000 acres of forests surrounding the city were completely devastated by acid rain, turning once lush green mountains into barren masses of lifeless gray rock. The Sakelga River, flowing through the region, has become entirely stained bright red and unnaturally thick because of extremely high concentrations of iron oxide, resembling an enormous open wound. The soil is saturated with heavy metals, with the accumulation inside every 11 square feet of the city center matching the weight of 4 solid bricks made entirely from pure lead. Leaving this deadly wasteland behind, the journey continues toward the vast, shimmering waters of Kampong Luang in Cambodia. Vapi bears the title of the chemical capital and one of Asia's most heavily polluted industrial centers, where the air is filled with the choking smell of sulfur. Groundwater contamination is so severe that water pumped from wells contains dissolved pollutants comparable to squeezing the weight of 3 lead bricks into every gallon. The Damanganga River, flowing through the industrial zone, has been completely overwhelmed by enormous volumes of wastewater, enough to flood a large football stadium with contaminated water. Visitors arriving here must wear thick, specialized protective masks to avoid breathing the industrial smog that constantly hangs in the air and clings tightly to every throat. Ulaanbaatar is a capital city burdened by some of the worst air pollution on Earth, where people endure what feels like a genuine urban nightmare every single day. Visiting this city brings a suffocating experience as travelers step onto the streets and immediately notice the bitter taste of coal smoke clinging tightly to their throats through the dense haze. The city rests within a basin surrounded by 4 towering mountains, unintentionally creating a gigantic natural trap that prevents polluted air from escaping into the atmosphere. Residential emissions produced by traditional hand-fired coal stoves sometimes exceed the total pollution released by major industrial factories, making household heating a significant environmental challenge. Fine particle concentrations in the air exceed international safety standards by dozens of times, creating alarming pollution levels comparable to major cities devastated by severe industrial disasters. The city's architecture reveals a striking contrast between aging Soviet-era concrete apartment blocks and traditional felt tent settlements spreading across the surrounding hillsides in every direction. This place stands as a capital, enduring some of the harshest environmental pressures on Earth, where people struggle each day to survive under relentless and unforgiving living conditions. Nestled deep within a rugged valley, Zenica faces a suffocating ecological disaster as this steel-producing city remains completely surrounded by dense clouds of hazardous industrial pollution. The surrounding mountain ranges trap the city like an enormous furnace, preventing industrial smoke from escaping and allowing thick pollution to remain suspended above the valley for many consecutive days. As a result, local residents are forced to keep their windows tightly closed and limit outdoor activities to cope with the chemical-filled air drifting from the nearby steelworks. Over many decades, the total volume of coal dust and toxic waste released by this steel complex has reached amounts comparable to the weight of an entire small mountain of steel slag, enough to completely fill thousands of large football stadiums. Consequently, visitors exploring this valley should wear protective masks at all times outdoors to avoid inhaling the countless fine soot particles that constantly linger in the air and cling to the throat. You should avoid visiting during winter, when thick industrial smog blankets the valley, and always bring a specialized protective mask together with safety glasses to help protect your health. After leaving the suffocating steel mills of Zenica, could any other industrial region in the world possibly push pollution and ecological destruction to such an extreme limit? The answer is Bor, a mining city infamous for some of the worst pollution in the region, leaving behind severe and lasting consequences for both nature and human life. Visiting this place is a suffocating experience, as travelers, stepping from their vehicles, immediately notice the bitter taste of sulfur clinging stubbornly to their throats through the heavy air. Sulfur dioxide emissions released from the smelting complex exceed permitted limits by many times, turning this area into one of the most severely polluted regions in the surrounding landscape. The surrounding natural ecosystem has suffered extensive damage, with groundwater and soil heavily contaminated by metals, including copper, lead, and zinc, after more than a century of mining activity. Exploring the streets surrounding the mining district creates an overwhelming experience, as the thunderous roar of enormous industrial machinery echoes continuously from smelting facilities that never seem to rest. The urban landscape is smothered beneath towering columns of yellowish smoke pouring endlessly from smelter chimneys, staining the sky with the haunting appearance of a bleak post-apocalyptic world. This place stands as a permanent industrial scar upon the map of Europe, reminding humanity of the devastating price paid when nature is exploited beyond its limits. Blanketing the entire city of Taranto is a suffocating ecological disaster, where a historic coastal community has become completely surrounded by the smoke and dust of a massive steel manufacturing complex. Dioxin and heavy metal concentrations within the coastal lagoon once reached record-breaking levels, forcing fishing communities and countless aquatic species to struggle for survival as toxic industrial chemicals contaminated their only source of life. Visitors strolling along the waterfront are welcomed not by refreshing sea breezes, but instead by the harsh smell of industrial chemicals rushing directly into their lungs. You will likely need to wear a protective mask throughout your outdoor walks to avoid breathing the countless fine coal particles that constantly linger in the air and cling to your throat. Every photograph facing the coastline is dominated by towering steel factory smokestacks that continuously release enormous clouds of dull gray smoke into the sky, both day and night. When visiting this area, never consume seafood caught nearby or touch the lagoon mud directly, reducing the serious risk of exposure to highly dangerous industrial contaminants. Leaving behind the heavily polluted air of Taranto, viewers are drawn into the overwhelming solitude of Kadikchan, a completely abandoned mining town hidden deep within the far eastern wilderness. The society that once existed here consisted of a thriving Soviet-era mining community, whose workers spent their days and nights deep underground, providing the energy that kept an entire nation warm. The urban landscape featured numerous multi-story reinforced concrete apartment buildings, now scarred by abandonment after thousands of residents were forced to evacuate within only a few short weeks following a catastrophic mine explosion. Many apartments still contain old televisions, refrigerators, and clothing hanging inside closets, as though their owners had merely stepped outside for a quick errand and never returned. This place has become a completely lifeless wasteland, standing as powerful evidence that people are sometimes forced to abandon their homeland when natural resources are exhausted and entire industries collapse. Port Harcourt endures a devastating ecological disaster as this major oil-producing city remains completely surrounded by thick black oil slicks and heavily contaminated muddy landscapes. Decades of energy extraction have released enormous quantities of hazardous waste into the environment, leaving the surrounding land severely degraded and stripping away much of its natural vitality. The major rivers flowing through the city have become deeply contaminated with industrial chemicals and heavy petroleum residues, transforming once natural waterways into dangerous streams of dark, polluted water. Nearly every corner of the city is blanketed by dense layers of black soot, while the air carries an overwhelming odor of gas that lingers throughout the urban landscape. Travelers visiting this region should wear protective masks continuously along major roads to avoid breathing the countless fine particles of hazardous soot suspended in the surrounding atmosphere. Local communities are forced to endure daily life beneath skies filled with toxic emissions released from the numerous offshore and onshore oil facilities operating throughout the surrounding region. Lahore, celebrated as the cultural heart of its nation, now struggles beneath an ecological nightmare where the atmosphere remains filled with dense clouds of hazardous pollution. Visiting this historic city delivers a suffocating shock as travelers step onto the streets and immediately inhale thick smoke carrying a harsh chemical smell that burns the throat. Fine particulate pollution regularly exceeds international safety standards by more than 10 times, comparable to a person directly inhaling the smoke from dozens of cigarettes every single day. Its subtropical climate, combined with calm weather, creates frequent temperature inversions, turning the entire city into a giant enclosed chamber that traps industrial emissions close to the ground. Along the historic streets, tens of thousands of closely packed homes display intricately carved wooden balconies, resembling enormous beehives crowded tightly beneath an oppressively hazy sky. This city stands as a painful reminder of the difficult balance between preserving centuries-old cultural heritage and enduring the overwhelming pressures of rapid urban population growth. This place is forever linked to the worst nuclear disaster in human history, transforming a model city into a completely abandoned urban landscape without a single permanent resident. Visiting this destination creates a chilling experience as travelers pass through radiation checkpoints before entering a silent region where no one lives anymore. Radiation records show that the radioactive isotopes released during the disaster exceeded the total emissions from the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima by hundreds of times. Geographically, the area lies entirely within a vast exclusion zone surrounding the accident site, forming an isolated ecological belt completely separated from the outside world. The urban landscape consists of sturdy, high-rise apartment buildings standing empty, while desks, beds, wardrobes, and unfinished household belongings remain exactly where former residents left them. This place stands as a powerful living memorial to the Cold War era and the technical failures capable of erasing the existence of an entire civilization. Holding the title of the world's most polluted city for air quality, Ahvaz turns every breath its residents take into a life-threatening danger because the atmosphere is filled with thick, fine dust and industrial pollution. The harshest feature of this urban hell is the combination of desert heat and moisture rising from the Karun River, pushing the heat index as high as 165 degrees Fahrenheit. This extreme temperature goes far beyond every danger warning level and is hot enough to cause heat stroke and death for anyone outside without protective equipment. Desert dust storms regularly block out the sunlight during the day, reducing visibility to 0 feet and forcing schools and airports to shut down. When the rare rainfall mixes with the polluted air, it quickly turns into acid rain, sending more than 20,000 people to emergency hospitals in just one night because of respiratory failure. Even though the environment is so toxic that it pushes beyond the limits of human survival, hundreds of thousands of poor workers remain trapped because the local oil fields are their only source of income. You are entering Wittenoom, the most toxic ghost town in the Southern Hemisphere, where streets were once covered with millions of tons of deadly asbestos waste. This town, completely erased from official maps, remains blanketed in toxic dust that can lodge permanently in the lungs after just a single exposure. While infernal heat scorches the landscape beyond 118 degrees Fahrenheit, desert dust storms can carry hazardous fibers for miles across the surrounding region. Although nature has transformed Wittenoom with striking red cliffs and brilliant turquoise lakes, the entire landscape conceals an exceptionally deadly danger. Imagine rolling down your car window to admire the majestic wilderness, only for a gentle breeze to carry countless microscopic toxic fibers through the air. Thrill-seeking tourists entering this area immediately face polluted air containing dangerous, ultrafine asbestos particles. The sharp contrast between its breathtaking scenery and its devastating environmental legacy has turned this place into one of the world's most bizarre urban nightmares. Once ranked among the 10 most polluted places in the world, Sumgait was known as an environmental hell because it released about 132,000 short tons of highly toxic chlorine, sulfur, and mercury into the air every year. This disaster caused the local cancer rate to rise by 51% above the national average, while the risk of bladder cancer alone increased by 149%. Even more heartbreaking was the children's cemetery, where thousands of babies who were stillborn or born with birth defects were buried because toxic chemicals had passed through their parents over many generations. Even so, hundreds of thousands of people continue to live there at a population density of 6,000 people per square mile, because affordable housing and factory jobs remain their only means of survival. Thanks to a large environmental restoration program, the city dramatically reduced toxic wastewater from 158 million United States gallons to 20.1 million United States gallons each day, while also removing hundreds of thousands of short tons of solid waste. Today, Sumgait is transforming into a modern industrial park, stretching along a 2.6-mile tree-lined coastal boulevard.